It's no question that Japan has become the center that houses all denim head culture, and that Japan has revolutionized raw denim and has changed the menswear and men's fashion game as a whole. Japan's inspiration, backed by American heritage, has completely transformed vintage style and has taken on a life of its own to create something that blends together modern utility with the quality, the craftsmanship, and the ruggedness of how garments used to be made. The raw denim head community of Japan was inspired by the vintage Levi's that flooded the markets in the 70s and 80s with this whole influx of American tradition, American goods, American machinery, and ultimately they kind of took it over and made it better than what it was. Japan slowly perfected the reproduction of the Selvedge denim that we all know and love today, creating this entire community that you and I are both a part of that makes some of the best jeans, if not the best jeans in the entire world. And I mean, when you hold a pair of these in your hand, when you see how they age down, when you see how they fade, there's really no question as towards why. Now the thing is, Levi's did start this entire traditional kind of niche culture or niche subcategory inadvertently by inventing the raw denim jean, but ultimately Levi's ended up losing its way, which is why I personally have a lot of beef with Levi's, and I am gonna do a video on that soon, because I think Levi's premier line that's built off of their heritage, which is Levi's Vintage Clothing, or rather LVC, is starting to die out. And it's so evident, and I've actually talked with employees who work at Levi's, multiple different stores, multiple different positions within the company, and they all agree with the same thing, that Levi's Vintage is dying out. It's being ignored, and even when they were going for it, they just didn't do it better than what the Japanese did. It's just kind of sad that Levi's started this entire thing and just kind of let it die, and the Japanese had to step in and pick it up, make it better. And it's just crazy because a lot of these jeans are really what Levi's Vintage Clothing should have been. But anyways, video on that coming soon. I'm not going to talk about that too much today, but today I do want to talk about a relatively new Japanese raw denim brand. And I know everybody loves the Osaka 5. I actually did a video on the Osaka 5 a couple of weeks ago. Make sure to go check that one out. But basically what I really want to stress is that the Osaka 5 is not the end-all be-all of raw denim head culture or raw denim jeans in general. Granted, while they did popularize Japanese selvedge denim, there are so many new brands out there that quite frankly do it a lot more exciting than most of them do. Some of these brands include Sugarcane, Oni, and Pure Blue Japan, to name a few. But today I want to talk about TCB, or the Two Cats brand, which is a Japanese repro brand that is dedicated to replicating jeans from, I believe, the 1930s to the 1960s. And one of their most popular jeans is the 1950s jean, which I actually got my hands on today. And basically TCB, or the Two Cats brand, was started in 2012 by a man named Inoue Hajime, and basically he fell in love and was fascinated with American culture, American tradition, or at least the vintage idealism of what American tradition was, and decided that he wanted to faithfully reproduce vintage Levi's with the vintage fits almost exactly to the T, but kind of modernize it and make it a little bit better than what it was, with subtle changes within construction, with fabric, and just kind of make the idea of a better LVC and a better Levi's jean and better jeans as a whole. So basically here today I have the TCB 1950s jean, and I've been wearing this for about 2 weeks or so, and I gotta say this jean is really impressive, especially with the feel of the fabric that they use, which we will talk about. But basically let's start from the beginning. I had heard of this brand in passing watching different videos like CRD, but I never really went and pulled the trigger because I really wasn't 100% knowledgeable within the brand itself, and I knew that one day I was gonna get there. But basically I went to visit the Williamsburg Garment Company in Brooklyn, which is an amazing workshop where they not only produce custom and bespoke raw denim pieces, all of which are overseen by Maurice Malone, who is the owner and founder of Williamsburg Garment Company. And while I was visiting there, Ben Nissan, who is an absolutely great man and is so knowledgeable in his product, actually introduced me to the new TCB line that they're carrying, and I think they might be the only store in New York that physically carries the line of TCB. And he actually went and visited the manufacturer himself and just has so much knowledge on the brand, and I told him he actually should start a YouTube or at least a TikTok or something. So I hope that this gives you a little kick or a little push if you're watching this, Ben. But anyways, the knowledge that he had and everything that he told me about these jeans and how faithful they were to vintage Levi's in the 50s, I knew I just had to cop and do a video on these. But anyways, why don't we just get into the jeans? The very first thing I noticed when Ben handed these to me was that they were a lot softer than what I had anticipated for something that was supposed to be a vintage repro of 1950s Levi's 501s. Because from what I understand, they were really stiff, really rugged. They were an unsanforized denim that was actually supposed to be shrink to fit. What TCB has done is they actually took a very similar denim and they kept it unsanforized, and they actually constructed it out of Zimbabwean cotton, which is some of the softest cotton that's used for raw denim. It's also some of the most expensive, and they actually gave it a one-wash treatment and kept it unsanforized, so it has this beautiful hairy character. It's got a lot of slub, it's got a lot of gradation and blues, and you guys know, if you've been on this channel before, I really prefer natural indigo over synthetic indigo, but I can't even lie, the red cast on this jean just really suits the look. So I think this is genuinely the first red cast jean that I really mess with. I mean, the character on this jean, on this fabric is beautiful, and it is just simply one of the softest. It might even be softer than my full counts, which are also made from Zimbabwean cotton. I mean, hands down, that's the first thing I noticed, and probably the first thing that most of us are gonna notice when we cop a jean like this as well. So basically, Ben told me that they took a vintage 501 from the 1950s and kept it in their archive as a reference piece. So they actually spec'd it out and took all the measurements as well as the construction details and just basically reproduced it in a beautiful fabric and gave it this incredible washing effect. So basically what Ben Nissan told me was that the paper patch is actually intentionally used on this jean because in the 1950s, due to cutting costs, due to rationing, they actually began using paper patches on Levi's instead of the leather. And from what I understand, they actually took the stitching within the waistband and attached the waistband as well as the paper patch all at the same time in one single stitch, because when mass production started to become a thing, they wanted to cut time, they wanted to cut cost, and they really just wanted to get the jeans to you as fast and cheaply as possible, which arguably is probably what hurt Levi's in the first place. But yeah, I just really love the way that that's actually starting to garner some indigo dye and eventually is gonna rip down and kind of fray and tear into something beautiful, something vintage, something aged. I also really love the banana as well as the tobacco kind of color stitching. I'm a sucker for two-tone stitching on denim jeans. I just think it's a subtle detail that adds a lot of character without being too ostentatious, because having a bunch of selvage as well as high contrast fades can already be a little much, but that's just a really nice subtle detail because they're not too different, but they're different enough to add a little bit of a kind of excitement to the jean. So from what I understand, they were actually still using rivets on the 3 pockets in the front of the jeans in the 1950s. So to keep with that faith, TCB also went ahead and left exposed rivets in the front at the edges of the front pockets as well as the coin pocket. And the coin pocket itself actually also has a Selvedge ID sewn into it as well. The thing is, I'm not entirely sure if that's actually what Levi's used to do, but either way, I'm happy with it because I really love a nice hidden selvage on the inside of a pocket. But that's the thing about TCB, is they like to take vintage heritage style and modernize these garments to fit to today's standard. Another thing that I love is that they did not skimp out on the hidden rivets on the back pockets of these jeans. And I mean, the construction on the inside of the jean as a whole is just incredible. It's so cleanly done. The chain stitch on the inside of the waistband, as well as the felled seaming that attaches the back yoke to the leg itself, is also a two-tone color stitch. And you could really start to see that if you look closely enough. And I think the only other jean that I have that on is on my sugar canes. And this is a detail that nobody will ever notice except you, but it's something that really just excites me about this garment. But yeah, everything on the inside is super clean. The jeans are very cleanly done. And you know what? I really notice the trend between brands that actually really care about their clothing, about vintage reproduction, as opposed to a mass manufactured brand that does raw denim. There's a clear difference between a raw denim brand that cares when the owners of the brand are just denim heads in general. They're not necessarily fashion guys, but they just like good clothes and they just love raw denim. There's a clear difference in the construction, the look, the feel, and that's something that I feel like is very consistent with these TCB jeans. One thing I will say is that these are not super fast faders at all. I've been wearing these about 2 weeks and they creased up a little bit, but not too much. Granted, anything one wash is going to have a little bit more of a softer fading rather than something that's been super starched, but that's not a bad thing because I feel like the one wash and unsanforized treatment is good in a way where it allows you to enjoy the beginning of the life of every jean rather than waiting for it to fade down. You want to enjoy your jeans as soon as you start wearing them. You don't always want to look for the fade. You don't always want to baby them. So going down to the inseam of the jean, you actually have an overlocking stitch, which I know everybody says is a weaker stitch, and it is a weaker stitch or a weaker seam than the flat felled seam. But again, this is a vintage repro piece of raw denim jeans, and this is just the way that they used to do it. So this should not be knocked. This was not an attempt to cut cost. This is just the way that clothes used to be made. And to be honest, this is a lot stronger of an overlock seam than I've seen on other jeans before in general. And something I really love about these jeans that you really don't see that often, I've actually only seen it on the full count 0105 5s that I have is that they have this gorgeous pink Selvedge ID, which you really don't see pink Selvedge ID. I love a nice pink. And from afar, it looks basically white, which is what Levi's used to do when they made their own raw denim, because it really wasn't a style detail to have Selvedge outseams. It really was just the way that clothes were made. But yeah, I really love this pink Selvedge ID. And I think that the gorgeous tobacco stitching on the chain stitch complements the Selvedge ID very well. On the front, you really do see where the banana and the tobacco stitching really shines, because you see the banana stitching on the belt loops on the top and the bottom. Then you see the tobacco running up and down the belt loop. You see the banana stitching on the outside of the front fly. Then you see the tobacco running down the inside of the front fly, the banana on the bottom of the waistband, the tobacco on the top of it. I mean, I really just love a nice two-tone stitching. It just really makes for an absolutely gorgeous jean. Now, probably my favorite detail about this jean has got to be the red tab on the back right pocket. I actually have no idea how they're getting away with this, because Levi's is super notorious for suing any jean that gets anywhere remotely close to a Levi jean, and somehow, someway, TCB got it done. I really love the red tab. There's nothing on it, just a copyright symbol on it, but it just gives it that real vintage feel. And I love that the branding is kept to a minimum on this jean. Granted, I feel like TCB deserves some shine, but it just makes for a really understated yet elegant, gorgeous jean. You do have branded buttons running up and down the front fly. Now, this is a 4-button fly, so it's got a little bit of a higher rise. I like a higher rise. And from what I understand, the fit of this is actually very close or very akin to how the 1950s jeans used to fit. And I really love that fit. It's got like a little bit of a tighter thigh. It's not suffocating, and it almost seemingly flares just a touch at the bottom. Nothing like a boot cut or a flare jean, but just has a little bit of that tubular look. And that's something that I really love, because I've never been able to find that fit before, yet I've been so enthused by it. I mean, I gotta say, TCB really nailed this one. I really love that they have the 2 cats insignia on the back patch. And from what I understand, Hajime is actually a cat enthusiast. He loves cats, which is the reason why he named it the 2 Cats brand, at least from what I understand. And that kind of speaks to me too, because I love cats. I have my own cat. You guys have seen my cat in my videos before, which is just another way for me to connect with a garment like this that's absolutely beautifully made. You would really think that this jean costs $300, $400, sometimes I've even seen $500 jeans. These jeans, from what I understand, cost about $185. That is something that's absolutely insane. Don't get me wrong, it's not a cheap pair of jeans, and $185 is nothing to scoff at, but for a quality made Japanese product like this that uses the highest quality Zimbabwean cotton possible with expert construction and expertly done fit, it really is simply a no-brainer. And basically, from what I understand, Rio, who is basically the brand's right-hand man from what I understand, says that they don't want to price their jeans so expensive that they start alienating people. And they also find that when jeans are too expensive, people start to baby them. And when you baby your jeans, you don't really wear them, you don't get any fades. They really want people to wear their jeans, and they want to make it accessible to people who aren't necessarily into raw denim like that, but they appreciate the look, they appreciate the feel, they appreciate quality clothing. And that's something to me that speaks so much about the character and the philosophy of TCB. And I mean, I would recommend this jean to anybody, to be honest with you, because this jean is absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see how it's gonna fade down. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate the love and support. I really appreciate the heavy influx of new subscribers that we got within the past week. I mean, it's been crazy. I really appreciate you guys, for real. Thank you so much for coming along the ride. And I was so surprised to see that y'all loved the last video that I did on baggy or wide leg pants versus slim or skinny pants. And I really love doing these kind of controversial topics. So if there's anything in raw denim, menswear, and men's fashion that you want me to talk about, definitely let me know in the comments, because I love doing the things that people don't want to talk about. I love doing different things and just keeping it fun and keeping it interesting. Oh, and before I forget, one last thing, if you are interested in the TCB jeans, definitely make sure to size up at least one size, because they do run a little snug in the waist. So just bear that in mind, but either way, it's an amazing jean. But anyways, guys, with that being said, thank you guys again, and I'll see you next week.